G'day watchers, welcome back. For today's review, I am going back to Seiko. So here is the casing for this particular piece. Nothing special, standard card Seiko box. So let's open it up and have a look. And there we have the piece. So this is, yes, it is a Seiko Samurai. Now this particular model is the SRPB51. It is under the Prospex Divers series that you can see with the X over the 6 o'clock marker there. And this is a revitalization or reintroduction of the Samurai line of watches. Of course, Samurai is not a Seiko moniker. It is a moniker that, as with many of their models, are coined by their fans, such as the Tuna, the Monster, and what have you. So this particular model, the listed MSRP is $525. That is pretty much the MSRP for most of the Samurai models. But in terms of realistic retail, you're looking at under 400 US roughly on many online sites. I have seen this for around the 390 mark. Okay, so in here, the movement is the 4R35, so it is the very standard movement you've seen in many of the watches I've featured. The Monster, the Turtle that I featured earlier as well is a 4R35, 21,600 beats per hour, 21 joules, and a 41-hour power reserve. You heard all that before. It does hack and does have a manual wind function at the default position after unscrewing the crown. And a quick set date in this case. The 4R35 does have day and date, but they have removed the day in this case to implement only a date disc. The case really, I think, is where a lot of the, I guess, the character of this watch is. It is a 44mm diameter case in 316L steel, of course. Thickness is 13mm. And the lugs are 22mm wide, so appropriate for a 44mm watch. The lug to lug, interestingly, is only 48, a smidgen over 48mm on a 44mm watch. That's probably one of the shortest lug to lugs you'll see. On 48 to 44, that's only 4mm larger lug to lug distance. A typical difference is about 7, 8, 9mm. I think in many watches that you see yourself if you measure that particular dimension. So that means that it's a relatively square look. As you look at it head on, it's kind of square. The lugs don't stick out a great deal that you can see here. So the surfaces are predominantly brushed. You can see there. It does transition to polished on the back. So the back is mainly polished that you can see there. And you can see that's a classic Seiko Tsunami logo for many of their dive watches. And with the exception of that little bit there on the side opposite the crown, this is a bit of polish. But apart from that, everything else is brushed on the top. So the case back you've seen already is screwed in, and the crown with a little knurled edge there, similar to some other watches I've featured, plain, not signed, is also screwed in, giving that diver's 200-meter rating that you can see at the bottom there, just above the 6 o'clock hour marker. So ISO 6425 certified diver. The dial, right, look at it. The dial is actually one of the more interesting pieces here. So you can see that relief texture pattern there, that nice square waffle, really that's been coined the waffle dial, and really I really quite like that, the way it plays and catches light and shadow. It just gives that texture, that depth to the dial there. That's something that a lot of people have liked about this watch. The markers are all quadrilateral, so most of the hour markers are rectangles, but the 3, well, if there was a 3, the 6, the 9 are kind of quadrilaterals, and then you got 2 4-sided shapes making up the 12 o'clock to give you that kind of that shield motif, or at least that looks like a shield to me. And then if you look at the combination of that with the hour, marker, which kind of is an arrowhead, and then the minute marker, which is like a sword. That's you know, shield, sword, and arrow. That's really cool to play into this very angular motif that it has here. I mean, look at the side here, right? You know, that flat angle playing into the bracelet connection there, the end link of the bracelet on both sides, right? Brushed and angular. Look at the bezel, which is of course it's a 120 click unidirectional bezel with a steel insert, knurled edge, so it turns very easily. Really, it sticks out and it turns very easily. But just to point out, the first 15 minutes of the bezel has these kind of gray shading there. But if you look at the rectangles, it's kind of like more paneling rather than the typical minute markers you see elsewhere. That kind of plays into the angular motifs of this watch as well, which is where, as I understand it, the moniker comes from. Samurai, because of the sword, maybe the shield as well, the paneling, the angles, evoking a sense of armor plating, which you may see in traditional samurai garb. And it really is quite something. And then I've all of these Seikos, I just compare it side by side with my Monster here, right? The Monster is a 42, and it's pretty muscular, but this one takes it to the next level with 44 millimeters. That's so superb angles. It really outsizes the Monster quite easily. It is a larger watch, but sometimes larger doesn't mean wearing larger. In this case, very much it does. Looking at it all over, the Monster almost looks relatively soft because it's all curves, right? There's not nearly as much angled surfaces. In fact, very little. This one, it's just all sharp angles. So that's really what you're looking for, what you get when you get a Samurai. Okay, moving on. The hands and our markers are all filled with Lumi-Bright, and Lumi-Bright always performs greatly whenever I've got my hands on the Seiko. I put a lume shot here to show really how excellently it performs, and that's a function partly of the size of the markers, and these markers are large and they really do glow very pleasingly in the dark. The crystal is flat, and of course at under 400 USD realistic price for this watch, it is going to be hardlex. It's not going to be sapphire for all of the dive watches in their $500 retail range, as far as I have ever seen. Now the bracelet, I've talked about the end link, and that's the most remarkable thing about this bracelet. Everything else is fairly standard Seiko. It is brushed on the top and polished on the side, push pin links, and then going into this clasp, which is similar to many you've seen. I think it's pretty much exactly the same as the one on the Monster that I just shown there, with that dive extension. I'll just quickly show that. Okay, so you have to kind of flick that out and unhook it to get that dive extension, right, and then flick it back. Right, so pressed metal there, nothing too special, with a button release and an extra safety keeper on the top there. So nothing too spectacular for the bracelet, as you have seen in many of the Prospex range divers I've shown. Just quickly put it on for the wrist shot, and there we have it on the wrist. So, it is a large watch. It is one that has definite wrist presence, but because the lugs are short, it kind of keeps it within a reasonable size, even for my wrist, which is only really a 17 centimeter wrist, not huge. But this watch is that large, yet somehow manages to just sneak in on the wrist there because of those tightly curving lugs. Okay, so what I've really enjoyed about this, well, really in this watch, you're talking about the design. The design is really great. I really like it. The case, the angular, sides, just the way it transitions, and good thing that it's brushed, because these angled surfaces, if it catches a beam of bright light, it's gonna potentially really shine in someone's eye. So appropriately, I think this is brushed. The bezel with those angles there. That dial, you know, we've mentioned the dial, there's waffle dial and the hour markers, you know, just a point of difference here. If you had an original Samurai, you know, back from the 2004 up to 2008, I think, when they were produced, they didn't have this dial, and also, of course, they didn't have the Prospex X. And there's been a facelift, you know, the hour markers are different, the hour hand has been changed. You know, it used to be a little sword, now it's a nice arrow. So there's been differences that has been upgraded from the original Samurai, just to explain it there. You know, what else has been great about this? Well, it's got all the usual, you know, really good Seiko diver features. It is an ISO 6425 performing diver at 200 meters. It's got that fantastic Lumi Bright, and it's very solid. It's really solid steel. You know, the thickness, the you know, really muscular angles that you can see here. You know, just look at the amount of steel that is in there. It is, you know, it is tough. What's not so good that you might want to consider? Well, it is large, right? 44 millimeters is not for everyone, and in this case, it really does wear large. You know, that's all the way. That bezel goes all the way to the side, so it's 44 on the bezel, not just the case. Now compare that to the Seiko Turtle that I've reviewed before. Now that Turtle was close to 45 millimeters, so the case was bigger, but you know, it wears smaller because the bezel really across the top was only about 41 millimeters. So even though that was a bigger case watch, it wears smaller. This one actually wears its size. It's 44 on the top, and you know, that's how it feels like on the wrist. And that's not for everyone. You know, maybe it's too big on the wrist for some people. It's certainly, the case design is quite aggressive. Right, it's not a conservative design. You know, even though the colors are conservative, you know, some people may not like the I guess the outlandish nature, slightly outlandish nature of this case, and it does reduce its versatility slightly. Yes, you know, I can wear this to work where I wear a tie, but you know, maybe in, you know, slightly more formal occasions, this one probably doesn't get under the radar. And then lastly to mention, because of its size and because of its solidity, it is heavy. You know, this is 180 grams, and you definitely feel that. That's one of the heaviest Seiko divers I've reviewed, if not the heaviest. It's certainly slightly heavier than the Turtle. It's also slightly heavier than the Monster that I featured. So guys, there you have it. The Seiko Samurai SRPB51. Let me know what you think, particularly if you have this and how you like Samurai watches. You know, I'm really interested in your thoughts. If you enjoy my videos, do consider subscribing. I'm getting new stuff all the time, and I feature right here on the channel, always aiming to be objective and unbiased about all things horology. Thanks again, guys, for watching, and as always, I will catch you next time.